Hello, everybody. Good evening. We are about to start our virtual town hall for the 33rd District. And with us are Senator Karen Kaiser and Representatives Tina Orwell and Mia Gregerson. So here's the thing. When we sent out the invite, we also included a link to collect questions. And so many of you sent your questions in ahead of time. And so we're going to be using some of those. But if you have a question that you want to ask, please make sure you put it in the comments of whichever platform you are watching this. And let's get started with opening remarks from here.
I think she froze, but I want to thank Lily for hosting and moderating this town hall. And I want to thank all of you for joining Tina and Mia and I as we talk about the session we just got out of on March 10th, the 2022 legislative session. And I'll tell you, it was for the fifth year in a row, a session where we got out on time with a balanced budget. And we haven't done that since 1899. So we set a record almost over 100 years ago when we had 5 years in a row with a balanced budget and on-time adjournment. Sine die, we call it. So we had a very intense, very fast, and very productive session. And we want to talk with you about your questions and find out what's on your mind as we give you what we can in terms of what we got accomplished. So with that, I turn it over to my colleagues, Representative Orwell.
Thank you, Senator Kaiser. And it's an honor to be here and to serve our community, and want to thank my seatmates and all the staff. You know, these have been very intense times, and we've had a lot of challenges. Families are struggling, businesses. So we had a lot of work to do in Olympia. And I just want to really acknowledge it was a very different session. You know, we had to do a lot on Zoom, and I really appreciate all the staff that really made that possible. One of the things that came out of that is we had a lot more participation. We had record numbers of people signing into committees and sending feedback. And so that was really a positive part of the session. So some of the issues I work on, and I don't know what's going on with my voice, sorry, is I do a lot around public safety. I serve on the Public Safety Committee. I also do a lot on behavioral health. And we're in this very unique moment where we're rethinking our crisis services with the 988 starting, and I've been doing a lot of work in the community on this. And I also do a lot around K-12, working a lot on, again, supporting our students who are struggling right now with the pandemic. And we also have been looking at language access and apprenticeships and all the things we can do to make sure students have a path to be successful. So I look forward to your questions tonight. Again, it's an honor to be here, and I will pass it off to my seatmate, Representative Gregerson.
Thank you, Tina. I'd like to say thank you to all the staff that helped put this together, whether it was the newsletter that talked about the announcement or the collection of the questions. Staff has really taken the brunt of so many questions and keeping up on the many meetings that we've had over the last few years during COVID. And I just want to say thank you and recognize that everything that we do really has so much support of staff behind the scenes. I guess what I'd like to say in my opening remarks is that your comments and your concerns over the last few years have been heard. We've really tried to use the budget and the meeting space to really deliberate and think creatively around how to use the federal dollars in a way that we continue to be in partnership with communities of color, businesses, trusted messengers, and those that are the farthest from recovery. We know that everyone's feeling the pressure of inflation and some things that we have no control over, but there are things that we do have control over. And I'm hopeful that tonight during our town hall, we'll be able to talk about some of those things that we've really tried to put together, both being creative and new approach, but also recognizing that we need to stay committed to some of the things that we've been working on for many, many years. COVID has made it so that we're going to have to recover by helping those that need us the most. And I'm looking forward to talking about those investments tonight. Thanks.
All right. Thank you. So hopefully this is going to work out. I think my internet might be a little wonky, but so if you can't hear me, I'm sorry. I'm going to do my best. We have our first question from Ahmed, and Ahmed asks, how are you making housing more affordable?
That is an excellent question. I will jump in first. We have a housing crisis, and it really is on every level of housing, whether people are trying to purchase homes, rentals. We have people struggling to stay in their homes. And we're just seeing the price of housing and rent just skyrocketing. And so that is an excellent question. And one of the things we really did this year, which I'm really proud of, is there's record investments in our housing trust fund, which is a really important source to build more housing. We also have been looking at what's called transit-oriented developments. We have the light rail coming, and really it's an opportunity to build a lot more housing around these areas. And so a lot of us, and I've been working with community leaders on looking at how do we create more workforce housing. There's a whole committee looking in South King County around home ownership. So again, we're trying to do those investments of supporting the agencies that actually do the development, as well as putting new dollars in both for, again, developing new housing as well as rental assistance, both to tenants and to landlords. I also do a lot of work on foreclosure prevention. We also want to keep people in their homes that might be struggling right now. So really proud we put more money into counseling and to mediation to help on that.
In fact, our budget, and I know Mia can talk about this more, we put more than $500 million into affordable housing. And this is a short budget, it's called a supplemental budget. And it's a huge amount of money for us to invest with our Housing Trust Fund and our other housing agencies in our communities. It's aimed at preventing families that are at risk of becoming homeless from becoming homeless, and also for providing rapid rehousing for those who are homeless. And also, we provided something like almost $50 million for rental assistance because, as you know, during the pandemic, we had so much dislocation. So a lot of rents were frozen. And this rental assistance will help landlords recover some of their lost revenues and not shut down apartments. What we need is housing. And we are building housing. If you've gone around our district lately, you've noticed that huge housing development near the Tukwila Sound Transit station, light rail station on Pacific Highway. There's another 2 or 3 other very large apartment buildings being built in our district, even as we speak.
To follow up and to support some of the work that my seatmates have talked about, I think it's on us to recognize that the eviction moratorium has ended. And with that comes a bow wave of many, many evictions. And so we did use some federal dollars to help with that. But we also know that keeping people in their jobs, so worker restoration and continuing to keep people doing the hard work. So we invested $55 million towards stipends to help workers stay in the field to help folks that are homeless and have housing crisis. We also invested in, probably the senator will talk about, the difficult to discharge out of our hospitals and where do they go. And so there are so many wraparound support mechanisms that really deal with the housing crisis, not just building of the housing. Because we weren't able to pass the policy bill around comprehensive planning and the missing middle, we did invest many millions of dollars to help partner with local governments so that they could use their comprehensive planning to do better around building more affordable housing. I think the last thing I want to talk about is we have the most number of mobile home parks that are scheduled to close this coming year. And with that comes technical assistance. It's very difficult to move entire communities of people from where they own a home. And so we have been thoughtful about that. There's a couple $2 million in the capital budget for that purpose. And then the last I actually really want to say is utility assistance. We know that the ability, so we have 100 million in utility assistance and 50 million in broadband assistance to help the arrears for both low-income folks and some businesses.
All right, thank you. We have a second question. This one is from Priya. Public transport can be made easily accessible to the public without having to drive in order to reach a park and ride. What are you doing to support transit?
Well, again, it's always comes down to money. And in this case, our transportation package did increase our investment in King County Metro, which is our basic backbone bus service. I believe it's almost $500 million for that as well. So we will have more bus service to our transit hubs. And the problem in the suburbs is we don't have the level of density that supports really efficient mass transit. So that's another reason why we are building these affordable housing developments, to make sure that we have the ability to move people to where they need to go without having to get on those congested freeways. Because, you know, during the pandemic, people stopped driving, but boy, it seems like everybody's driving now, and they're all driving like maniacs. So it seems like to me that people are driving way too fast and way too reckless, and that's maybe part of some of our behavioral health issues that we're all facing after 2 years of this COVID pandemic.
I'm really proud of I'm really proud of our transportation committees. They held over 90 listening sessions around the state and really put a package together of $16 billion over 16 years. And in that continues to invest in our Climate Commitment Act. And you'll see when it comes to transit and making it more affordable, we invest millions and billions of dollars towards 3.1 billion in transit and 50 million in walking and biking projects. We continue to connect communities. We know that means being able to safely connect. We make transit, I think, free for students under the age of 18. Some real game changers. Now, in the operating budget, we also invest over $100 million towards electric vehicles, electric bicycles, doing the grant programming that is required for overburdened communities. We know that through that is our communities and so many in the suburbs. And so by prioritizing those communities, I do feel like we're going to see some of those investments earlier. Yeah.
All right. So we have a third question. I don't know who one is from, but let's read it. It's Melissa, sorry. 16 billion in transportation funds. What is shovel ready in the SeaTac neighborhood?
I'm not exactly sure shovel ready, but as you know, the big project to connect 509 into I-5 and 167 is on this budget. We are funding the leg that needs to be completed to connect the dots between I-5 and 509 and 167. That is something that we've supported and encouraged, because so much of the heavy truck traffic on I-5 going up the hill at SeaTac creates huge backlogs of traffic congestion. And if the trucks can go on 509 from the Port of Seattle to the Kent Valley or to Tacoma or wherever, by getting around that hill and around the I-5 backup, it'll be much more efficient. Now, we don't have everything we want, but we did get a big chunk of change for that particular project. And I think we also got a large appropriation to finish the Gateway project, which is the continuation of the 167 improvement.
The operating budget transferred $2 billion from the operating budget to the transportation budget. And with that was some of the caveat that the good senator talked about when it came to the Gateway project. The transportation budget was actually one of the budgets that was gutted the most during the pandemic, that really felt the biggest pain point when it came to the estimates of revenue to help support the project. So that's why we transferred such a large amount out of the operating budget to help make things whole. And that definitely is in the SeaTac neighborhood, where people come through our community but don't stay. And so we want to help get them do that without too much congestion.
The other thing that was exciting about the transportation budget was dollars around siting of another airport. And I do want to do a shout out. I've been partnering with Senator Kaiser on a committee she started, which is looking at another location in our state. And again, I know you worked hard on the Senate side, Senator, for this. And it's just really important. We know this airport has such an enormous impact on our community. And so as we're trying to look at these new locations, our hope is that they can find one that isn't smack in a residential area like we are, that has such a great impact on SeaTac and the surrounding areas. So again, I know this was a big team effort from the 33rd, but again, it's another step forward. And Senator, I don't know if you want to comment on that as well.
It's a big step forward. And we also got 10 million to invest in development of biofuels for jets. And that will reduce air pollution. And we're concerned about the air pollution from the jet fuel being burned over our heads. So that's another important step forward in terms of aviation and our community, because we are not going to, SeaTac's not going to go away, SeaTac Airport. It's going to continue to operate. So we want it to operate in as clean and as pollution-free way as possible.
All right. Our fourth question is from Colleen. Are you doing anything about catalytic converter theft?
Oh, thank you for that question. I serve on public safety, and this was a big topic. And I need to do a shout out to Representative Ryu, who's from the 32nd district, who really took the lead for us. I did end up teaming up with her so we could get her bill amended and kind of sent along the way. But I really appreciate, she really has done a comprehensive job working with law enforcement and dealers, and just really bringing everyone to the table that needs to be part of these solutions. So they're going to come up with a series of recommendations, but they're already looking at data that we can do better collection of information of what's going on. And there's things about having numbers on these converters so that they can actually be tracked and people won't be able to readily sell them in other areas. So I know Representative Ryu did a great job. I was very happy we got that one headed to the governor, and I think that's going to give us some really important next steps. And I know it's impacted our community, and I've heard from a lot of our neighbors, and it's very overwhelming. It can damage the car. It's very costly, and so I'm really proud we got some next steps here.
Okay. Our next question is from Stuart. State spending has gone up 50% while population has gone up 6% in the past few years. What happens if the revenue projections turn out to be overly optimistic? What will be the first cuts, or what taxes will go up?
I just want to mention that we passed a balanced budget with no major tax increases and some tax cuts. We also put a huge amount of money in our reserves, in our what we call our rainy day fund and other savings accounts. By having the kind of financial discipline that we've had over the last 5 years, our state budget has earned the first ever AAA Moody's bond rating. We're usually happy to get AA. AAA is absolutely fantastic. That means our interest rate for debt will be very, very low. And that's a wonderful thing. So I want you to be reassured that we have, and Mia knows the numbers better than I do, but we have put a significant amount of money away in reserve funds and in rainy day funds to be there if there's another crisis. And we have no idea what that crisis will be, whether it's another COVID mutation that creates havoc, or whether the international conflagration that's going on in Europe right now spreads. We don't know. So we are conservative in terms of our budget, and it's going to be, I think, very stable for several years because of what we've done. But even when we've done that, our state is ranked #1 by U.S. News as the best state to live in, and that's 2 years in the last two years in a row that we've got a #1 ranking. That's from U.S. News and World Report. And Oxfam has ranked our state as #1 for working people in the country. So I'm thinking we're in better shape than a lot of people understand. And I know Mia has a lot more detail about our budgets.
Thanks, Karen. And I'll try to be brief because it can get really wonky and actually be boring. A lot of times when we do the budget deliberation, we don't actually do it by a population number. We really do it by need. We do it by listening to what policy is being deliberated and really make sure we fund that. As you can imagine, if you pass a bill, a policy bill, but you don't put any money to it, it doesn't really help Washingtonians around the state. And the health of our budget is extreme. We're basically at levels pre-pandemic when it comes, as the senator talked about, when it comes amount in our reserves. We also have spent $5.6 billion. Some of that spending is one-time dollars. Again, as you know, there are large federal packages that have come our way, and it is upon us to really be smart and make sure we use those dollars towards recovery and dealing with the pandemic, but not investing in ongoing investments. And so that's where you're seeing huge swaths of dollars, as we talked about, whether it's rental assistance, utility assistance, business assistance, those are all food assistance, that's all related back to one-time federal dollars. Thanks.
Okay. Hopefully people can hear me. This thing is telling me that my internet is not stable. Okay, people can hear me. Good. I mean, not stable. Okay. Mike has a question. What are you doing to address homelessness?
Well, thank you, Mike, for that question. And it has been a priority for my colleagues in Olympia. And I'm really proud of the work we've done this session. Representative Chop, I thought, had a very compelling bill, which really said housing is part of healthcare. You know, there's so many people living on the streets that are struggling with mental health, addiction, and other issues. And we know these housing models like Housing First that rapidly move people into housing and then they surround them by services are very effective, and they're cost effective and they're humane, right? They're the right thing to do. So we are recognizing that. We're doing record investments. We're trying to invest in the models that are shown to be effective. And as you look at our housing trust fund, a lot of those go to what's considered 30% AMI, which is very low income housing, which creates the kind of housing we need to really transition people off the street. And again, it's not just about housing, right? It's about services and community and helping them be successful. So again, it was a huge priority, and really glad that we're taking some important steps.
I think
right.
I think it's important for us.
Oh.
I just want to use a little bit more time, if that's okay. We invested in wages in this budget. Some of the workers that are serving the most vulnerable, whether it's people staying in their home longer as they need caretakers as they age. We know we have a silver tsunami coming our way. It's already here. And we need to make sure that people that are working in those spaces can live with dignity. I'm very proud to say that we raised those wages to $20 and $25, depending where they are. I know the senator can talk also about the investments in our DD and our long-term community. Washington State is known for being committed to taking care of our people where they are and keeping them in the community if we can. That is part of our approach to dealing with homelessness. And I'll be the first to say we aren't going far enough and we have more to do. And we need some good local government partners to do this work. We cannot do this as just a state. The politics aren't there. The political will isn't there. We need partners. So I'm hopeful that as we all make homelessness one of our top priorities, we're willing to really roll our sleeves up and do that harder, more deeper work.
And just to say, we have to grapple with what's called NIMBYism, the not in my backyard kind of attitude that some neighborhoods have about bringing in affordable housing into the region. We need to have housing for everybody to have a healthy community. So if we don't provide the housing in their communities, then the whole community gets a little sicker and a little less secure. So it's important that we have these conversations, make sure that the appropriate kinds of housing and sizes and availability of services are also part of the package. And I will just add one little thing. Having the supported housing, which is where you have, what I call it is, you got to have a mom on site who reminds you to get to your doctor's appointment or reminds you to take your medications and is just looking out for your well-being. Having those kind of supportive services also comes with some federal dollars, because we can access Medicaid matching funds for a lot of those services. So it's a really good deal for our communities and for our budget.
Okay, now we're going to Denise. How is funding for education going to support teachers as well as students who've had a hard time with virtual learning?
Well, another piece of our budget was some significant funding for counseling and nurses in our schools. We have over the years seen too many schools cut back on counseling and cut back on having nurses available. And so many of our students have the same problem us adults have, which is we've been under lockdown and in masks and really restricted for a couple of years now, and it has had some real impacts on mental health and on stability and on learning. So we need to address those impacts and to make good on people who are in our schools and need to be able to socialize and learn and achieve like they would have if they didn't have a pandemic. The other thing is we did also provide some supplemental funding, and Mia again is our budget expert on this, but it's some of the schools lost students when they started learning at home. Some of the school districts actually had a drop in their student population, not so much in our school districts, in our area, but Seattle had a huge drop, for instance, of how many students are in the Seattle public schools. So we did some backfilling for funding for, I guess you could call them ghost students. They'll probably show up one of these days, but we don't know quite where they are.
Yeah, I was going to say, I just think that children and our children have been so hard hit by the pandemic, and we already have a high number of suicides of young adults in our state. And so it just really breaks my heart to see this pandemic having even more of an impact. And so the $70 million that we invested to add more counselors and psychologists and social workers to the schools is so important. And we need to support our teachers. This has been very stressful on the staff as well. And so, again, I know when I went to my teachers, including my daughter, who's a first-year teacher in Highline, they kept saying, "What are you doing around mental health?" And so I really do believe this is a good first step. And we did, I know our school districts, I think they are impacted by the lower enrollment numbers, and we're trying to, at least on a short-term basis, help them with that. But, it's a big transition for families. And I'm worried about the students that fell behind the most. And so one of the things I worked on this year was language access for the K-12 system. This is especially important for parents who maybe don't speak English, where English is not their first language, because it's so important that parents are involved in their kids' education, right? That's how students are successful. So again, students that maybe have special needs, that have intellectual or developmental disabilities, were very hard hit. And I think we need to, in our schools, really support their transition back from virtual learning. And really, again, I think the social emotional is the most important part. I know people are worried about catching up academically, and I know we'll take that on. But I just think really making sure they feel reconnected in schools is so important.
I'd like to add, because education, K through 12 education, is such a big part of the work that we do. We also invested in making sure that every student was going to get a school lunch, and we call it Universal School Lunch Program. We also made sure that our capital budget worked in partnership with ensuring that the facilities, the water quality, the seismic quality of the facilities is actually whole and healthy. I think we invest millions of dollars towards changing out lighting and I think air quality. So I want to just pay recognition that we really think about the detail of what the experience for each of our children and families and staff are. One of the things that we fought for was to make sure that as the cuts to the investments of the counselors, that did not happen to Title I schools, the low-income schools. We want to make sure that we continued on the trajectory that was necessary for our most vulnerable schools. I feel very proud of that work. We also continue to expand ECAP into summer months, and we invest heavily in working child care WCCC, to ensure that our kiddos right before and after school have a place to go. The staff is there ready to help support so our parents can go back to work. Thanks.
And I just want to add, one of my favorite bills passed this last session was expanding statewide the Dolly Parton Imagination Library. This is such a cool program. Dolly Parton is such an incredibly generous person. She has a program where they mail books to kids in their home for free, and kids who are 5 years older or less, I guess, and it encourages kids who aren't actually in classrooms yet to start reading and to start becoming book learning, as Dolly would say. And it's an incredible gift and an incredible program. And it's in a few other states, and now Washington State has it too.
All right. So we are just slightly over the halfway point. Everybody is doing very well. Thank you very much. So next we have a question from Miguel. Prices of food, medicine, gas are getting higher. What are you doing to stop that?
Well, I don't think we have the power to stop inflation. Inflation is a problem. I want to totally acknowledge it is a problem for all kinds of ways and all kinds of people and all kinds of families. But we cannot unilaterally in our state legislature end it. But we can try to mitigate the impacts. And that's what we did with the budget, and by providing services and providing the funding for services that people need. And so by encouraging economic growth, we in fact cut the business and occupation tax that small businesses pay to zero. So 126,000 small businesses in our state will no longer pay a dime in state B&O taxes. And by reducing some burdens and by providing more services where we can, that's a way to stabilize our economy. But it's way beyond our control. The price of oil, as you know, is very volatile. It was down around $35 a barrel. It went up to $135 a barrel. And now it's under $100 a barrel. You see the gas prices going up within hours of the increase in oil. You don't see gas prices going down when the oil prices go down. You see them, decline a penny or two. But it is frustrating that the prices people pay go up just immediately whenever there's an increase in cost. When there's a reduction in cost, not so much. And I think we need a little more consumer protection in place, and we'll be working with our Attorney General, because we do have a really good State Consumer Protection Act to make sure that we aren't being gouged. There isn't price gouging going on, and really taking advantage of people because of supply chain problems, sort of instability problems in the economy. Not necessarily something we can control, but we can police it and do what we can to mitigate it.
Yeah, one of the things, I serve on finance, and I'm really proud. I think it was Representative Ty on the House side had the Washington family tax credits that really allowed families that were struggling to get some rebates on their taxes. And again, that's money that they can use to buy food and other supplies. We also had, I think we did get this to the governor, which was around helping families with young kids and buying diapers and trying to not have sales tax on some of these things that, again, are so expensive that are burdening families. And, I think those were some of the things that we've done. And again, I think the hope is through rental assistance and other ways we're supporting around utility assistance, that those will provide some relief as families are experiencing increases in other areas.
And if I could switch over to healthcare for a little bit, I passed two bills that may help in terms of the cost of healthcare. One is reducing the out-of-pocket cost for insulin from $100 a month to $35 a month. And the other is to create a prescription drug affordability board in our state. A few other states have begun this work as well. And what that board will do will identify up to 12 prescription drugs a year that are not at an affordable price, and they will have studied the issue and found out that there's not any new costs in terms of providing the drug or new research in terms of the drug. It's a drug that's been around for a while, but there's just increasing prices. MS drugs are particularly egregious in this case. And it will be able to set an upper payment limit on up to 12 drugs a year, and to tell the manufacturers of those drugs, we will pay this much. We won't pay more. So the bill is complicated, but I want you to know that it will bring down, I believe, it will push and pressure the drug manufacturers to reduce the price of prescription drugs in our state.
I think, inflation is one of those things that so many people are worried about. I think that's what bonds everyone together, regardless of party or partisan politics. And that's why you see in our budget, unfortunately, there are no Republicans that voted for the budget, but that in our budget, we invest heavily in making sure that direct cash assistance when COVID started continues for another year, whether it's 30,000 families on TANF, whether it's a senior meal program, age blind and disabled, ensuring that the monthly supports there are in parity with TANF, which basically triples the amount of cash in hand. So those are other ways that we're dealing with inflation directly. While that doesn't fix the problems with inflation, it certainly helps to slow the downward spiral that families are facing every day.
All right. We now have a question from Ishbel. I so appreciate all the support you've given to manufactured home owners over the years. With the bill in House rules, that's House Bill 1100, and one on the floor of the Senate, Senate Bill 5079, why did neither of these bills progress this session?
So I'm not sure the status of 5079. It was sponsored by Senator Doss, and it was a closure notice. And if it didn't pass this year, let me just say, these things will come back. They have a life, and they usually have some problem that needs to be addressed. So we'll work on that in the interim, because that's an important, as Mia mentioned earlier, we have a lot of mobile home parks that could close in our district. So we need to make sure that the people living in those mobile home parks get plenty of advance notice so that they are not left in the lurch with really an impossible situation. So we'll be working on 5079, and I'll be working with Senator Doss in the Senate on that to make sure that we fix whatever was hanging it up and get it through next year.
Yeah, and I think 1100 was the Durer bill around property taxes and manufactured homes. And I'm not sure why that one did not move. We actually, and I've done one of the bills, but there's been several to try to give more property tax relief to struggling homeowners. And I think we did a great job, and we forgot to include the manufactured homes in a lot of those changes we made. So that bill was to address that. I do hope that's a bill we can get through next year. And thank you, Ishbel, for all the work you do advocating for people in the mobile homes.
Yeah, and HB 1100 is not new to the legislature, but it has a very uphill battle when it comes to first right to purchase. landowners in our state are very, very powerful. And so we just need to continue to ask them to be at the table, to come up with a proposal that will work for both. It feels like we're very close, that will allow the community that extra time to come together to be able to put that proposal together. And I hear the property owners loud and clear that they want to make sure that they're able to reap several different types of tax benefits in order to give the community that extra time. And I think we can continue to work that out and ensure that there is some sort of element of opportunity for our communities to rally together and be able to save their park if it works out. As you know, Ishbel, we did put several millions of dollars in the budget to help work with communities to be able to have that technical assistance. So we think that we're moving in the right direction. Thanks.
Okay, our next question is from James. Why are you continuing to restrict the right to bear arms?
James, I am really amazed when I read the paper these days that shootings, mass shootings in particular, are no longer a big story. You don't see them on the front page. You see them in briefs, in little sort of short notices that another 3 people were killed here and another 12 people were killed there and another 15-year-old was shot at school, and on and on and on. Our country, our state, our communities have way too many people being shot. And that is my concern. I think we have plenty of guns, personally. I think we have something like 3 guns for every person in the country in terms of gun ownership, private gun ownership. So I don't think it's a lack of the number of guns, or I think what we have is a real crisis in the use of guns in places where they should not be used. For instance, at public school board meetings, there's been a new kind of, I guess it's called brandishment, a new kind of behavior where people like to show off guns and use them to intimidate people. And this is being done in public meetings. And we did pass a bill to say you can't do that. You can't try to scare your school board members because you've got a gun on your shoulder or on your hip and you want to show it off. So those kinds of behaviors really have to be addressed in our communities these days, because people have almost a trigger, that's bad use of the term, but a very quick reaction these days, and very angry reaction these days to so many little trifling annoyances that mostly, if in the past we would have just brushed off as just let it go. But now people are pulling out guns and shooting somebody over it. And I don't know if you've noticed, but the marijuana retail stores that we have in our communities are targeted right now by people going in with guns blazing. There was a young man killed in Pierce County last night, I believe, at a retail cannabis store. So these are the public safety issues I am worried about, is the rampant gun violence that seems to be out of control.
And I want to add to this, and I really like how Karen talked about our focus is really around trying to tampen down people who are using guns to intimidate others. What you see is a focus on areas that we can control, whether it's when you're going into a community gathering place like the Capitol, or whether you're going to vote in an elections office. And really, that's what we're focusing on. You'll see this past year is ensuring that the use is not to intimidate, and which has nothing to do with actual right to bear arms. We actually did not touch the laws when it comes to your right to bear arms. I just want to make it very clear that while we use terminology and potentially the vocabulary is different between us, I think that our intentions are very much the same, as long as you feel like it's not about using it to intimidate others and make them feel scared in a community gathering place. I think that's where our commitment is.
Yeah, and I appreciate the comments by my seatmates and the work that's been done. The one thing I will mention, a lot of people don't realize that 80% of all gun deaths are suicides. And so, we've also really tried to have a strong focus on this. This is especially true for veterans that take their life by suicide. And so there's also been really important work. I'm really proud to work with the University of Washington, the Department of Veterans Affairs, really looking at lethal means and how we really have safe storage of firearms and medications of people who might be at risk for suicide. So I think it's an important conversation, again, is who's vulnerable and how do we protect people who might be at risk for gun violence.
Okay, our next question is from Vicky. Washington has flourished economically to a large extent because of immigration. What is our state's stand on supporting immigrants?
Well, I may jump in first. A bill I've worked on for 5 years that came from the Kent community is language access in the schools, and it's to support immigrant families. And, I heard all these stories from families. I think in Kent, they have over 130 languages spoken in the Kent school district. It's beautifully diverse, but families maybe not feeling welcome or not part of their students' education, especially if they have students with special needs. And so we're really able to help schools have the tools they need and best practices so that those services can be available in really training interpreters when there's called an IEP, an individual education plan, and it's very technical. It's technical whether you have an MD or a social work degree. It's very difficult to navigate. And so it's especially important that we have trained interpreters that understand this and that really can be supporting families as they support their kids. So I also know we did a big investment in the budget, and I might turn it over to Representative Gregerson to maybe talk about that.
Well, I would like to mention that we have a couple of really wonderful nonprofits in our community, in our 33rd district community, to support immigrants and refugees who come into our state. There's Jewish Family Services down in the Kent Valley and Lutheran Immigration Relief in SeaTac. And both of those nonprofits are going to be receiving significant funding from Washington State's budget this year. I believe we sent them something like $75 million, not just those two, but the statewide refugee assistance programs. We don't operate state programs directly for refugees in itself, but we have these fantastic, many faith-based refugee assistance programs that are very, very active. They've been very active, of course, with the Afghan refugees that were fleeing from that awful war. And now, of course, we're looking at seeing if we'll be getting refugees from Ukraine as well. But we have a pretty strong social network of refugee supports.
And there's one thing I forgot to mention as well, and then I'll hand it over to Representative Gregerson, is that Open Doors, which is this wonderful agency in our community, really did lead the efforts on the K-12. And but they're also looking at a multicultural village and creating more housing and community centers and things that really are welcoming in our community, and really proud to be supporting that work as well.
Well, I have to admit, I don't have the exact figures here in front of me for the amount of investment. It was over 1,000-page document for investments around language access. But what I can tell you is that we invested millions of dollars towards civil legal aid. So many people need extra support and help. Domestic violence, farm workers, for them to have a voice, non-Medicaid investments. Help for those that don't qualify for TANF, to ensure that there are other support mechanisms, feeding assistance programs. So knowing that we have over 200,000 undocumented folks in our state, we always have to think about that through the lens of equity. And equity is investing more and more carefully in communities that need us. If we continue to invest the way we always have, then we will always miss these communities. And so I do want to let you know that we are very committed in investing in those spaces. Thanks.
Okay. So we have about 9 minutes left. We're going to try for a couple more questions. So let's hurry up and do this. Jackie is asking, why are hemp gummies and things like that being sold at gas stations? Isn't marijuana supposed to be regulated?
Jackie, you are so right. I had two bills to regulate what's called cannabinoids. This is a chemical term about a derivative of hemp. Our current law applies to cannabis, which is marijuana. Cannabis is not hemp. These hemp-derived gummy bears and vape pens and other products that are not in the cannabis regulated system. That's called the I-502 because it was passed by Initiative 502 system where we have retail stores. They are being sold at truck stops. They're being sold at tobacco stores. They're being sold at mini marts. And it's a problem because some of these products, a lot of them, first of all, they have no oversight in terms of what chemicals are in there and what the health aspects are. But secondly, some of them are intoxicating. So you have them being sold at places where, people are on the road driving and they're chewing on these gummies, and all of a sudden they're going to be totally impaired. And that means there'll be accidents. This is an awful thing. We had two bills. Neither of them could get all the way through. And it was so frustrating. We were working on the bill on the final night of session, still couldn't get it done. So because unfortunately, some elements of the retail cannabis system don't want any regulation outside of their system, I guess. So two things. The Liquor and Cannabis Board today put out a notification that any business selling these hemp-derived gummies and other products that are chemically derived and intoxicating will be in danger of losing their license to sell liquor, beer, and wine. The LCB can do that. They can take that license away, and that's a great profit center for a lot of mini marts and gas stations. So that should stop, I hope, some of the proliferation here. And the second, we're going to be having a 2-hour deep dive into this problem in June in the Senate Labor, Commerce, and Tribal Affairs Committee, which is the committee I chair and the one that has authority over cannabis, liquor, and all the vices. So this is a public safety issue as far as I'm concerned, and I'm glad the LCB issued an emergency rule on liquor licenses just as a first step, but there's more work to be done.
Okay, I seem to have lost the signal. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Yes? No? Okay.
Yes.
All right. So this might be our last question. And then after that, we will go to closing remarks. Jen asks, I like this. Look, what bill or budget item are you most passing this session?
It's hard to pick just one, I have to tell you. I had a pretty good session. I think my favorite bill was the apprenticeship bill, Senate Bill 5600. Apprenticeship is such an opportunity for all of our communities to get skills and a profession and a secure future. And the apprenticeship approach is to earn while you learn. That is, you earn a wage while you're working on the job and in the classroom to learn the profession. People mostly think that's only for people who want to be carpenters or electricians or something in the building trades. That's no longer true. So this bill, 5600, expands our apprenticeship programs to healthcare. We can, in healthcare, my daughter is in nursing school, so I know this. They have something called clinical hours. In apprenticeship, that's called on-the-job training. And in the healthcare field, we can do apprenticeship programs, and we are starting doing apprenticeship programs for all kinds of health professions, including nurses. In high tech, we have a really successful pioneering program in high technology that opens the door for women and veterans and underserved communities that don't necessarily think about going into coding. In public education, we have a program that we can have our classified staff employees in our school districts become certified teachers through an apprenticeship program. And we can do this, and people can do this while staying in their current jobs and doing an apprenticeship in addition, or they can do an apprenticeship full time. And this is going to open so many doors for opportunity for tens of thousands of Washingtonians.
Well, my top bill was the language access bill. I've already talked quite a bit about it and you've heard about it. I'm so proud that it came from the community. They've been part of the whole process and they'll be part of implementing it to really make sure we have a strong partnership between our families and our schools. I do want to mention is that we're talking about, and Senator Kaiser's bill on the apprenticeships is so incredible. I do want to mention that we have a program that we get funded in the budget, and it's called, I'm calling it Running Start in the Trades Summer, in the summer, where juniors and seniors and young adults can attend the new program in Kent. And it was so popular last year that we've actually expanded it to more summers and doubled the size. Of the 24 students that went through it last year, 11 got into IBEW, which is electricians, and everyone got placement. Some students started at like $40 an hour in these great professions. And so again, there'll be 2 cohorts this summer and next summer. One will be at the Highline High School. And again, it'll be open to all the youth in South King County. So just really proud that we have this pathway for students to be successful, especially coming out of the pandemic and students trying to find that path.
So very quickly, I'll just say that my favorite bill this year was really the Digital Equity Act. And part of that is really our commitment as a state to ensure that as people are using the internet, they're able to navigate that safely. The state has invested $49 million towards cybersecurity. We think about public safety in the sense of guns and stealing, catalytic converters, but the reality is that cybersecurity or having different communities be attacked through viruses is really one of the biggest crimes that right now. And so keeping people safe from that by learning literacy. So I'm very excited to watch that continue to flourish, as in the literacy skills. Thank you. We only had a minute, so I want to go quick.
Okay. Let's see now. We are closing this up. I am sorry that my internet has been so wonky today. This doesn't usually happen, but hopefully it went smoothly on the other side. We're going to go to very quick closing remarks. And to everybody who joined us this evening, thank you very, very much. If we couldn't get to your question, whether you posted it here in the comments or you sent it to us via the link, please be sure to, connect with the legislators, call their offices, send them emails, ask them. These 3 ladies are very good at responding. So let's start with the senator with closing.
Well, before I close, I want to thank Lily. I want to thank Ken. I want to thank Jennifer, and I want to thank Molly in working as staff for this virtual town hall. Town halls always take a lot of staff time and a lot of effort, and I really, really appreciate their help. So in closing, some of the best bills ever come to us from constituents. We talk to people in our meetings and in our everyday lives in our communities, and we find ideas and we have questions to answer. And when we get the answer, we say, well, why not do it this way? And we're going to continue, I'm sure, all 3 of us, to listen and to bring those questions and those suggestions to Olympia to see what we can do to make our state even better. We had a short 60-day session, intense and exhausting, but successful. And I'm just very happy that I have such great colleagues to work with in the 33rd District. And we work collaboratively as a team. And we get stuff done for our district. We get stuff done for our communities. And that's just so rewarding for all of us, I know. And we wouldn't get it done without you telling us what needs to be done first. So thank you so much for your comments, your suggestions, your criticisms. All of them are useful. And I really appreciate your involvement and participation.
Again, this is Tina Orwell, and well said, Karen. We have the best staff in the world, and I just want to thank them so much. And it's really one of the highlights of being in Olympia. And I need to also do a shout out to Mary. If you've reached out to my office, you've talked to Mary, and such an incredible team. And, you know, these are difficult times, and I just want to say, please don't hesitate to reach out to our office. So much of our job is to make sure that the government and the state is working to support you and on your behalf. And I agree with Karen. Our bill ideas come from the community, and I love teaming up on bills. And so right now I'm doing a lot of work on the 988, the 3-digit behavioral health line. And if you're worried about behavioral health, we have enormous, amazing changes coming. And my office is always available to talk or get your feedback on those changes. So thank you for being here tonight, and it's an honor to do this work.
I'd like to use my time to really do a shout out to nonpartisan staff. We have a huge group of folks who are just the brains that make sure that the policy bills, the budgetary, the fiscal notes, everything is accurate. And they are nonpartisan staff, and oftentimes they're the faces, they're the names that don't get mentioned. And I just really want to do a huge shout out to them. They really do great work.
Yeah, they save our bacon. Keep us from making terrible mistakes.
All right. Well, I can say without a shadow of a doubt on behalf of the entire staff that work with you, thank you very much. We really appreciate those words. And, you know, we really enjoy working with you. So it kind of goes both ways. People, thank you for joining us, and we will see you again next time. Be sure to connect with your legislators. You'll see the contact info, I think, at the end of this event. If not, you can just go to the House Democrats page or the Senate Democrats page and find the contact info for all three of them. Thank you and good night.